In 522 BCE, Persia struck the first international gold coin in recorded history, and every market from India to Egypt adopted it. Today, that same country cannot sell its oil on the open market and moves nearly 2 million barrels through a shadow fleet every day. Most people think Iran's economy started with the discovery of oil, but the real mechanics of its wealth were built 2,000 years before the first well. This is the story of how Persia built the entire mechanics of global trade and how it slowly lost every economic lever it once held. In 550 BCE, Cyrus the Great fused Persians and Medes into one realm and launched the largest empire of the entire ancient world. His empire stretched from the Aegean Sea to the Indus River, covering 5.5 million square kilometers across 3 entire continents. For the first time in history, a single authority ruled Egypt, Babylon, and Anatolia at once, fusing 3 ancient markets into one economy. But the real revolution of Cyrus was not military, it was economic, and it rewrote how an empire could actually generate its wealth. Under one power, the 4 largest markets of the ancient world began exchanging grain and silver freely without tariffs or political friction. For the first time in history, caravans from India could cross an entire continent and reach the Mediterranean without a single customs border. This was the first common market in recorded history, and it ran on a single system of accounts managed from the Persian capital of Susa. But this early market had one critical weakness, because every payment still required weighing silver ingots and scratching them to verify purity. Every single trade lost time on checking, and across an empire of thousands of daily transactions, this friction became a serious structural problem. The empire kept expanding its reach, but its economy still ran on Bronze Age trading technology that dated back more than 1,000 years. And then a new ruler came to power who understood exactly what this expanding empire needed, and he built the tool that changed everything. His name was Darius I, and he rose to the throne in 522 BCE after defeating 19 rival claims to the crown. Darius was not a warrior by nature but an administrator, and he saw at once that the empire was losing money on every single trade. He did what no ruler before him had ever attempted to do. He struck the first standardized international gold coin in recorded human history. It was called the daric, weighing exactly 8.4 grams of pure gold, and its design remained unchanged across the entire empire. Alongside the gold daric ran a silver siglos worth 1/20th of the daric, creating the world's first functioning bimetallic monetary system. A merchant from Sardis could now walk into Babylon and pay for grain without any weighing, without any scratching, without any proof testing. Every transaction in the empire instantly became faster, and every faster transaction delivered more volume, more trade, and more tax to the treasury. Darius split the realm into 20 provinces called satrapies, and each one paid a fixed annual tribute based on its economic capacity. Egypt delivered grain and 700 talents of silver every year. Babylon paid 1,000 talents, and India sent 360. For the first time in history, an imperial budget existed on paper, fully known in advance, fixed each year, and stored at Persepolis. All the collected tribute flowed into Persepolis, where it was melted into standardized bullion and stored inside the deep vaults of the royal treasury. When Alexander captured Persepolis in 330 BCE, he walked into the largest single concentration of precious metal in the ancient world. He found tens of thousands of talents of gold and silver, and the melting of this captured trophy reportedly took several weeks of continuous work. This wealth was not built by military conquest or plunder. It was built slowly by 200 years of quiet, disciplined tax collection. But no tax system in history has ever worked without infrastructure to move the money, and Darius understood this problem better than anyone before him. If you want to understand how economic empires are really built, subscribe. We break down one mechanism behind one system in every video. Darius built the Royal Road, a stone-paved highway stretching 2,700 kilometers from Sardis in Lydia to the capital of Susa. Way stations with fresh horses waited along the entire route, and an official courier could cover the whole distance in just 7 full days. For the ancient world, this speed was physically impossible elsewhere, and Babylon was reportedly receiving major news faster than Athens or Corinth. But the true purpose of the road was not communication, it was commercial traffic, and caravans and tax shipments moved along it constantly every day. The Royal Road became the first trade corridor across continents, and it permanently reshaped the economic geography of the known world. 400 years later, a significant portion of its original route would become the western segment of what history now calls the Silk Road. The Persian Gulf simultaneously became the maritime hub of the empire, where Indian cargo ships unloaded spices, textiles, and gold at the Susian ports. From those southern ports, cargo moved slowly up the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, finally reaching the busy markets of the eastern Mediterranean. By the end of the 5th century BCE, Persia was running the single largest economy the ancient world had ever seen by any reasonable measure. But the real story is not how Persia became rich. The real story is what happened to this model after the empire itself collapsed. Every empire that ruled this land afterward inherited the exact same economic skeleton that Darius had built almost 2,500 years earlier. Fixed taxation, central treasury, unified currency. This model outlived every dynasty, every religion, every empire afterward. When Alexander destroyed Persepolis, he did not touch the satrapy system. He simply replaced the Persian governors with his own officers. Parthian and Sassanid dynasties each rebuilt the model in their own style, but never changed its underlying logic, and Iran remained the crossroads. In the 7th century, the Arab conquest brought a new religion and a new ruling class, but the underlying economic geography stayed unchanged. Persia became the critical bridge between the Islamic Caliphate and Tang China, and silk, spices, and porcelain flowed across it for centuries. In the 16th century, the Safavid dynasty rebuilt Persian statehood from the ground up, and Isfahan became one of the richest trading capitals on earth. Isfahan grew into one of the largest commercial cities in the world, where Indian, Dutch, and English merchants ran their operations side by side. Persian silk effectively became a form of currency in European trade, and the Safavids exchanged it directly for bulk shipments of silver and gold bullion. But over the next 2 centuries, everything quietly changed, because European powers found direct sea routes to India that bypassed the Persian corridor entirely. The main trade routes ran around the coast of Africa instead of through Persia, and the ancient overland corridor lost its historic value. By the 19th century, Persia was trapped between 2 growing empires, the British pressing up from India and the Russians pushing down from the Caucasus. Britain wanted to guard the road to India, Russia wanted access to warm seas, and Persia became the arena of their strategic contest. This 100-year struggle was called the Great Game, and by its end, Persia had lost control of its own economic sovereignty to outsiders. The British took the tobacco concession, the Russians took the banking concession, and the Shah traded strategic industries for European loans. By the 20th century, foreign firms controlled every significant sector of the Persian economy, from customs to banking to telegraphs. And then one event changed the entire direction of the country, and the entire direction of the global energy market for the next century. In 1908, a British geologist named George Reynolds was drilling an exploratory well at a site called Mosaddegh Soliman in southwestern Persia. On May 26 at 4 in the morning, a massive column of oil exploded from the ground with a roar that shook the desert floor. It was the first major oil strike anywhere in the Middle East, and it permanently reshaped the geopolitics of the entire 20th century ahead. A year later, the Anglo-Persian Oil Company was officially founded, and British investors took majority control of every drop of oil pumped from Persia. Persia received only 16% of the profits as royalties, and every other barrel of revenue from its own oil flowed directly to London. In 1914, the British Royal Navy switched its entire fleet from coal to oil, and Persian crude instantly became a top-tier strategic asset. Winston Churchill pushed through the British Parliament the purchase of a majority stake in the company, binding Britain to Persian oil forever. The British government suddenly became the single largest oil player on the planet, and the entire foundation of that position sat beneath Persian soil. In 1935, the country officially changed its ancient name, and the land that had been called Persia for millennia became known as Iran. But the name change did not touch the structure. British firms pumped the oil, British banks held the revenue, and Iranians got only scraps. In 1951, a new Iranian prime minister named Mohammad Mosaddegh did something no third world leader had ever dared before him. He nationalized the entire British oil company overnight, and for the first time in history, a developing country reclaimed its own strategic resource directly. Britain responded with a full naval blockade of the Persian Gulf, and no Iranian oil could be legally sold or shipped anywhere. The Iranian economy collapsed in 2 years under inflation, shortages, and falling revenue, while Mossadegh remained popular but diplomatically isolated. In August 1953, the CIA and British intelligence jointly executed a covert operation against him, called Operation Ajax. Mossadegh was overthrown and arrested. Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi returned from European exile, and Western oil companies retook control of every well. And in 1979, this entire 25-century-old system collapsed in just 18 months. Part 2 coming soon on the channel.